consider every important question in life leads to a deadly combination of inaction and torture. Pondering what truly defines good and evil, how to embody one and reject the other, and the consequences of our principles and shortcuts to do so would only lead to mental anguish in a dirty, tepid pool of human complexity, and from having sat in it so long, leave you too atrophied and diseased to even lift yourself out. Torture leading to inaction, leading to torture, leading to inaction. The only salvation from this is to be incomplete, to exist without ever truly knowing the four fundamental W's in one H. We approximate an answer to reach a conclusion, use that conclusion to move past the moment, and then reform it into the next question for the next conclusion, a future reached in incremental steps of desire, necessity, and force. For the pessimist, existence is just mistakes that we have to justify. For the optimist, though, the mistakes have a point, a progression. Each one is a heavy stone we try to carry to the other side of an ocean without dropping it, only to end up failing and creating a line of boulders in our wake. But it is a line for sure, each one dropped providing a quicker path to follow through the current, each step taken another moment the arms could hold, working in tandem until eventually, at some point long after our death, some distant human can finally drop one on the other side of this massive gulf. Each question seems so deep now, but so shallow later, and this is exactly what we should hope for, that for each piece of ancient wisdom which feels so obvious today, there should be another left to the future with the same fate. If every question we ever ask becomes the stuff of children's storybooks, and the remnants of our lives on this site fall into obscurity to give the second death, then that's the moment it was all proved truly important. The torture and inaction are solved if we do this together. More hands and more time to carry the load. The important questions we can't solve, let's ask them anyway. So, of course I have to consider how we judge a human life. If they could either be reincarnated or cast aside forever, what decision would progress the world's goodness? This is the question at the core of Death Parade, which tells the story of Arbiters, eternal, emotionless beings created for one purpose which they can never leave, to judge the souls of the dead. The prescribed methodology is to draw out the darkness in people's hearts, which is achieved through pairs of people competing in slowly intensifying games. The shock of death messes with human memories, and so the participants believe these activities will determine whether they live or die, effectively tapping into the heart of their decision.
Do you happen to know what the most primitive emotion human beings experience is? Fear, my dear.
Cheating is never explicitly stated anywhere in the rules, against or for, and so subtle encouragement seeks to bring it out. Like a game of darts where you could never make it 0 with just your own, a slowly creeping despair of no guarantee that you can live, until you realize that there's enough darts between both players instead. How they win doesn't matter, because winning or losing means nothing. Only how they behave in this extreme process does. If they commit evil, they are wicked and sent to the void. If they refrain, they are good and become reincarnated. The progression of Death Parade is designed to present the flaws in this methodology, and a healthy dose of that overall progression is from its relationships progression, the bond between Decim and Chiyuki. The former is an arbiter of 5 years, and the latter a woman who arrived in this bar with memories of dying, and as such refused to play the game. What would the point be? She's left in Decim's care as an assistant, and from their proximity and relationship, he slowly begins to understand a new perspective, a human perspective, which leads him to question his own purpose and judgment. Her inexplicable and chaotic, yet passionate and caring reactions to the games make what once seemed to be simply common knowledge work into cruelty. This is more than chance, but a ploy from Nona, Decim's boss, who believes
There should be more than one way to judge, at least in my opinion.
And as such sets out on making him the test case for a new method, a human method. From Chiyuki's reactions, it's clear that we would object to many things in being judged this way, not least of all the very base assumption of these games, whether that standard is intended or not. To get there, we have to start with the first judgment, a newlywed couple whose honeymoon was cut short by the husband trying to steal his wife's phone while driving, as he believed she was cheating, leading to a fatal crash. He is the expression of all the trouble we witness in their judgment. He is the one who attacks Decim, the one who accidentally hits the board and puts himself ahead after they resolve to waste their darts to avoid the pain the game inflicts on the other, the one to do so again after the pain from his throw causes hers to hit instead of miss, and to even try to do so again after learning that she's pregnant because he doesn't want to believe the child is his. He is the constant aggressor of the entire thing, up until the very end, where she dramatically reveals that, of course, what he assumed to have overheard from her friends was correct. She was only using him for his money. The kid was someone else's, because how could she love someone as lowly as him? He charges her, but is stopped, and they're judged. He's reincarnated, and she is sent to the void. The decision here is subjective. It's up to you to decide which you find worse between the two, or even, as we'll see in a moment, what the truth really is. But this lays out the criteria clearly. A human being is their worst potential. We can say this because despite him acting in line with traditionally evil traits a majority of the time, with aggression, distrust, shamelessness, she was supposedly the reason for those traits. Without her, he would not be behaving this way, and it was her worst moment of unfaithfulness which made him so. This is what they are judged upon. It is an interesting principle because in a way it could root out evil if true. If there are people who are actually evil, and those who are only made to express it even if they aren't, well, removing the former group would leave the latter with nothing ill to express, and so no evil within the system. If people had no reason to scream and shout, then they would cease to. But I think we all know this isn't exactly a realistic principle. Imagine if every awful action people took was excused with, well, they had a reason to be that way. Some of you don't even have to imagine that, it's probably already happened to you. Part of being a good person is not expressing the evil which we're faced with back to the world around us, because that in turn gives others a reason to do the same, feeding an endless cycle. If we blame her for him, who do we blame for her after that? All this does is meekly attempt to prove that deep down humans are good, corrupted by some original evil, which is a good thought, but does origin matter millions of years after the fact? Even if we knew the world has changed so much that it wouldn't help. What matters most in the moment is how we deal with these negative forces, and assaulting every other person involved isn't the solution. This idea also states that even if someone never acts on the evil they feel until it's forced out by extremes, they are more evil than the one who always expresses it. If someone feels hateful deep down but never acts on it, are they evil as far as anyone else can actually be concerned with and perceive? When Nona ponders this couple's situation for herself, she thinks,
That wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. Takashi was a person who couldn't trust anybody.
It was his unconfirmed suspicion, small and evil, not a grand one, which festered and grew into something much larger, evil causing stress, causing evil again and again. A simple conversation could have fixed this, but he never did so. So if we decide that a series of smaller evils is the better expression than the potential for one large drop, then we must also state it's crucial to make an active effort to recognize and handle those small evils before they grow larger, right? It requires constant awareness. But in the end, there is no objective way to judge this. No matter how many percentages we try and apply to things, it's only a small experiment of the mind to consider things in more solid terms. The point is it valid to judge someone at their absolute worst if the absolute worst will likely never come in their lifetime? This seems like an effective way to make a decision on one specific type of person in response to stress in one specific type of way, not a fair guideline for a species as unique as we. We can already see that the basis they're working on feels quite reductive to its truly very complex situation. But that's before we even get into another part of the equation, which subjective being is following this subjective principle to begin with. Beings who have not just different perspectives, but different makeups entirely. So what will be gained and what will be lost when one sees the other? We start to find this in the big reveal of the first case, which happens when we see it from a human perspective again in the second episode, and Chiyuki easily picks up on something Decim missed. Before the woman's big reveal, she walks away, taking a moment that seems like preparation, and as she turns to reveal the big news, she's clearly crying. What Chiyuki gathers from this, in addition to how ill-fitting it is compared to how she was acting the entire time, is that, well, she very well could have been lying. This is aided by the idea that it also mentally eases his total meltdown. If she says that the child isn't his, then that car crash he caused no longer killed his only kid and ended the happy family he always dreamed of. Instead of coming to terms with unjustified self-destruction, he only has to countenance a mistake she forced upon him. From all their experience together, she may have just known herself to be the more mentally tough one, and as such took the brunt as one last act of love. And if that's true, then she wasn't either side of our stress-evil equation. She was faithful, pure, and good, yet she was the one cast away. Not only is the principle they follow for judgment flawed, but it can't even be applied correctly due to the subjectivity of perception and experience of one doing the application. When Decim hears this theory, he's shaken over it. He never even considered the idea that someone would cheat the game to their disadvantage, that their words wouldn't match their thoughts. Because why would that ever be? What sense would that make? It acts against every ounce of logic by nature's standards. The first concern should be that basic emotion of fear, of continuation in many forms. But he is not like us. He has thoughts just emerging, not thoughts emerging from emotions. He doesn't understand that acting against that is the very proof of human value, at least the methods we've designed for it. Every single day, by acts of consideration like this, time and energy trying to know what good is, we limit ourselves for the good of our fellow humans. Even just existing with society is an act of this. We work jobs we hate to make goods they love. We get back home slower so that everyone can do so just as safely. And on a personal level, we do it all to support the people we love. Self-sacrifice is everywhere. A species no longer beholden to simple natural logic by our continued choice. We have evolved, so why haven't the methods placed on us evolved? Maybe this would work on people thousands of years ago who experienced kill or be killed time and time again, but a modern human just isn't ready for such a thing. It's entirely foreign to us. Maybe that makes the reaction more natural, but that's just shorthand for things we haven't experienced yet, and if we're going based on that, then why not judge which baby cries first as more selfish and be done with it immediately? That reaction, simply put, it's an outdated means of judgment. This is the difficulty in doing it properly. The methods must be updated again and again and again and again into forever. So long as humans change, the methods must change. There's a second fold to this as well. Why it's outdated. Decim doesn't understand and is shocked, not because he kept his mind blind to these possibilities, ignoring the people he witnessed. No, quite the opposite. He actually keeps reminders of them in all these mannequins around the bar. Sentimental hold-ons to things which caught his attention and a deep respect for
people who have lived a fulfilling life.
Something he's so fascinated with exactly because he can't do it. The Arbiters can't experience like we do. They're meant to be unchanging and cold, to exist eternally and keep fulfilling a set goal unquestioningly. They don't get to live and learn as we do, and have no motivation to do so in their limitlessness. That fascination is the problem because it entails something foreign, an unfamiliarity with the subject matter and the test of deciding which matter continues and which ceases. If he can be curious about humans, then by definition he is missing information in these judgments. Just as we fail to understand things properly until we feel them personally most times, the Arbiters fail to understand us because they can never live as us. The judgment is not the only thing which is wrong, so are the judges. The flaws with the methods haven't ceased though, as they also face an issue of equality, or rather of equity. While there does tend to be some kind of connection between the players, the game's methods are quite neutral, with random ones detached from either's past or skills, so that neither is given more reason to cheat than the other. The premise is that there's no special treatment that accounts for the lives we lived, with air hockey and playing cards leavening the field of physicality. But that's exactly the problem. That level field can make sure a star athlete doesn't make average Joe feel the need to cheat, but what does it do about the mentality each developed, the needs their lives taught them to care more or less for? This is highlighted in the third pairing, where a shut-in gamer and a reality TV mother are made to face each other in an arcade game. One of them is instantly comfortable with this, of course, his whole life spent on such things, while the other has no idea what to do, because what kind of reality show has copious amounts of sitting still and wiggling your fingers? The only reason it stays close enough to be dramatic is because she believes it's a hidden camera show and tells him to make it more exciting by holding back. This is like a light, well-intentioned cheat, but it shows that the scales of this judgment, which remember relies on the moment of evil, are weighted heavily to one side. He has no reason to ever consider cheating. Just by doing something he did every single day, he could walk through this game. Well, to have any chance, she needs outside factors. The test isn't putting him in the situation to be judged as they've decided defines judgment. There was nothing which allowed him to be seen as evil and everything for her to be. Sure, we often have to be the better person, and that can be a mark of goodness, but is it a fair comparison to someone who's never had to do the same? This unequal element is something she calls out in desperation when they realize how serious things are, but it's simply met with the statement,
And is fairness really something you've come to expect in your life?
and of course it hasn't been. The natural instinct to hearing reality TV star is understandably to scoff, but the show isn't something she does for fun or fame. She's a single mother of 5, and that's the whole premise. For people to come look at the stressed woman deal with her stress, to come judge her parenting and feel better about their own. And these 5 kids, it's not some situation of unworldly irresponsibility. It was just a kid who made understandable mistakes and got thrown into the deep end way too early from them. Multiple abusive men in turn left her alone with these children, shown in quick but revealing detail. Because of this, the show isn't fame, but what she describes as the first time she's been really able to provide for all her kids' need, and the older ones even seem to hold some disdain for her, likely from a harsh and limited childhood before this. She's always been working from behind and pulling the weight for more than one. And so when we look at a situation like this, can we call detachment from context fair? Or is it just a lazy way to reach an equal decision? The point is that it's not just a game leading her to cheat, it's that she's lived the kind of life which, well, needs one to cheat just to survive. She's more attuned to taking advantages that present themselves because that's the only way she's ever been able to make it. When they present, she will take them because she hasn't in the past, and all it did was cause more pain for her and 5 others. That experience has irrevocably changed her perspective, yet it's unconsidered. It's no mistake that a man who can't accept the support of a mother is contrasted against a mother who was for so long never able to offer that kind of support. How do we judge this duality of quality? Those who have a reason to scrap versus those who never did. Is this evil, or is it just survival within context? To be fair, after her and her family are clearly already comfortable, she exhibits some truly awful behavior still, and that shouldn't be excused. She is not a good person. But that cutthroat nature comes from somewhere that a judgment based only on reaction just doesn't consider. And this isn't the only bit of context to consider, because once again, there was more contrast between these individuals that's important but missed. This isn't to say whose life is more valuable by any means, but simply to point out responsibility as a factor, one that we can't forget about individuals. They are more than themselves, they are also in part who relies on them. They are the factors which determine how good or bad those next lives can be. This man has no one relying on him. For better or worse, he can be alone all day, and it only makes an emotional difference for others. His life was empty, and he decided it should end because of that. This mother, though, if she suddenly stops trying, stops living, then there are 5 kids who also suddenly stop having support, who stop getting to school and having meals at home and being able to go anywhere or do anything at all, who now have to relearn family and grow up with a pain meant only for adulthood. Her survival has a direct and physical impact on those around her, and that just fundamentally changes how one's going to behave. We can boil it down to a version of that ever-famous question. Is it evil to kill one in order to save 2? If one of a pair has to die, do we save the one who saves the most others afterwards in their life, who immediately prevents the most pain and allows for the greater chance of happiness later at the same time? I don't want to defend anything she does, but I always have a hard time placing the harshest words on fighting done by people others rely on. Fighting to support others in a different context is supposed to be noble, isn't it? The soldier trying to get home to their partner. Do we think of all the others on the opposite side who can't do that exactly because they did? Or do we think of the one waiting for them to do so? Part of why these judgments are made as they are is because this complexity is too much to consider. We've been debating it for centuries and have no answer. The rigidity of these games, the refusal to implement equity, keeps them much simpler than they'd otherwise be. And rigidity is something else. Of course, the methods she stoops to in order to win cannot be called good. and a truly moral person would never have done such a thing. The Arbiters have not faltered there. However, when we earlier mentioned how we've evolved as a species and these methods are outdated, it doesn't just apply to the whole timeline, but to each moment on it. Imagine the life of this woman, all these terrible moments of abuse and loneliness so suddenly applied to her, even physically to her being. Imagine how that would change someone, the forcefulness of that moment. Yes, there will be signs, and enough of those could also alter who you are, but it's undeniable that hitting the floor in that moment, she has become a different person almost in an instant. And since the result of that is undeniably something she's been judged on, why isn't the same thing true during the test? Because while they were justified in judging her actions, they were unjustified in not judging how those actions changed her. Seeing the brutality of what she's just done, she shifts priority immediately, forgetting any concerns for her own life to instead plead for this one that she just harmed so much. This could have very well cost her life in exchange for his, and maybe knowing what she's capable of, she would have even accepted this. But they don't check. Instead, Decim responds only with,
Continue playing the game.
Because the process is so rigid, it will not make room for anything else until it is completed. It's by the books all the way. And we know from the husband and wife that cause and effect that was considered, that someone can be made evil is accepted as truth in these games. So why is the test not accepted as one of those situations that can change people and make them act evil? Why does it lock them into who they were when being human is to change? All these flaws culminate in the last case, where a young man working to support his sister and an older detective meet. There's more than usual in this one as a two-parter, but it's also the most direct and obvious of the set, which reaches a single statement to summarize itself after all the drama unfolds. The detective and young man don't believe they know each other, and they don't. At least, not really. They didn't know each other, they killed each other. The young man seeking revenge on the pair who assaulted his sister. The detective wasn't actually in on it, even though he was at the scene, but he was watching from afar as the attack occurred because he was looking for excuses to kill criminals. Disgraced from his position, he fashions himself into a judge and executioner alike, and he explains,
But if I had stopped him, I couldn't have killed him. You can't judge a criminal unless there's a victim, can you?
The older man's need for certain evil before action is what turned the younger man's desire to murder, a far cry from its pure origins. His whole life was spent working hard to support his sister, late nights of labor so that she would never have to. And this is similar to the detective himself, who was once dedicated and virtuous until his wife was killed and he sought revenge. There was nothing they did to bring evil on themselves, no slip-up or unvirtuous action. The young man was even dealing with a very harsh situation, raising a sibling alone without parents, but never once resorted to cheating, led through any immorality through a simple desire for the most basic thing: family. They lived, as this test says a good person should, for all but a few moments at the end of their lives. A few moments where the basic requirement for life, a connection, was even stolen from them. So what's the decision here? Are they evil when 95% of their lives were moral? Is it truly one single outburst when faced with an unwieldy situation which defines those who did nothing wrong until that moment? If anything, the lesson should be that the right situation could corrupt anyone. Of course, the point is that what they faced originally to bring them here is only replicated by the test. This is the blunt point Chiyuki makes, summing up the series so far by saying,
Don't you see that you're just doing the same thing as him?
In reference to the detective. She goes on that we all live with evil, but that doesn't mean it defines us. We each hold some of it. Always, it's there from the unfairness of birth, of time, of place, and of so much more, but we temper it, tame it, and only in the worst does a good person release it, because it's not that we choose to express it sometimes, but that we choose not to express it almost all the time. So why are they creating the worst here? Why are extremes beyond what a person can handle the standard, drawing out evil and refusing to stop until it is, just to point it all out? All that's been proven is that they have so many reasons to be bad, and yet so many times choose good instead. It turns out that the method was good for one thing, disproving the very purpose they use it for. But we do see a better way with Chiyuki. In fact, her entire time in Queen Decim is a better way. The relationship she develops with him is the test known as Sot. As they spend time together, he gains and values her perspective, and desires to change for the better from it. He cares for her, is invested in her and how she lived, and to make a determination on her is the most he suffers. There's no quick scan of her memories condensed by another to determine what is important to her as with all the others, but there is a full recreation of moments from them that she herself is brought to explain from his inquiry. Instead of trauma bringing back her memories, it's little things she loved which are made to do so, like ice skating and Chavot. It's her own interpretation of herself, which can be judged as accurate or not by Decim, since he knows her so personally now, ensuring that context can't be missed. It's in how she viewed presumably all the other lives in this time too, the little things she found important and argued for that present what she values and doesn't without chance to lie. It's how they cooked together and cleaned together, her perspective on little annoyances and what her mind wandered to, how she's reacted to him doing the same, to life itself. This is the time, energy, and care which properly values a human life, which makes a human life. Nona is correct when she says that
A judgment ought to be accompanied by suffering. To suffer, yet stand firm. That's what it is to live.
not only in the sense of providing life value, something we've covered again and again, but also in simple understanding. We only suffer for things which have an importance to us, when what we find in them is worth what we lose for them. And so to not suffer at all when judging is to not care for the things being decided upon. And to not care is to miss everything under the surface. Imagine being asked to write a review for a forgettable movie that you saw 2 weeks ago. That's the level they're operating on. To judge life when so detached from it feels wrong because it is, and because there's a better way right here that they miss in cold efficiency. That's what this outdated method is, an efficiency that disrespects everything human. We're judged unfairly because it makes it easier, a cynical cycle which never ends. And yet, asking for a harsher method, a harder method, may be even worse for us. If we judge Oculus, the one who appears to be in charge, simply as a cold villain disrespecting us all for lazy efficiency's sake, then we ourselves are making a judgment out of context. Let's look then, literally, at what surrounds the Arbiters. While the individual bars are well maintained, the tower containing them is much less so, unkempt and plain in many ways. They get transported in old train cars past broken columns, clearly uncared for in most places. It's not like the Arbiters are living in paradise. They're like any of us who can't find time to fix up around the house. Now, lack of time is stressed just the same with the Information Bureau that runs responsible for processing of memories, always saying just how swamped they are. As Quinn describes it,
people are dying too fast, way too fast, which works out to 116 a minute. At that pace, it's impossible to do our best work.
Clearly, they need some more people just for the basics of these jobs, and then even more to relieve the stress. But there isn't any help from above. It's said in passing by Oculus that,
I'm afraid God has been gone for a long time now.
which means that this entire operation is going without the person who created it, without the person in charge of expanding it. We don't know if God simply got bored and left, died, or anything in between. All we know is the result: abandoned and eternal creatures. The methods have to be efficient because they're really not working with that much. But with Decim being a relatively new Arbiter, there has to be some way of getting more, right? After all, with the rapid increases in population across recent human history, logically they must have expanded somewhere. Well, there is a way that's hinted at, but it doesn't really solve things. The Arbiters may be crafted from the souls which are tossed into the void. It's not clear how many makes one or how long it takes, but this does mean that they can solve the issues creating harsh judgments with harsh judgments. Only by discarding more people carelessly could they grow enough to stop doing so. Really, they're quite like us, flawed creatures in limited situations, even down to how Decim recognizes in these crying souls that you just did the best you could. They, as we, have context which must be included. So they can't just increase production, that much is clear, but surely they should be able to at least take more time with each judgment, right? Why does it have to be as quick as drawing out one moment when we saw with Chiyuki just how much better things could be? That time, that energy, those stories which are beautiful and draw us in so much even, why not do that for everyone? Well, that misses what happens the longer Chiyuki's story goes on. cracks begin to appear in her skin, eventually spreading to full-blown holes, her mortal form breaking down in this immortal world. Humans simply can't exist in this space for long, and if they try to, well, we know from both Ginty and Decim that anyone too long in this world is simply voided by default. Another few days, and that might have been the end of this couple we loved, the worst possible end. So say every human gets the time Chiyuki gets, which is at least 5 judgments. If their ones right now are 66% accurate, then getting them up to 100% as Chiyuki got would take 500% more time. That sounds great, because you are getting accurate judgments now, but only for the ones who are judged, as that number of total judgments is now 5 times less. So you get 2 good decisions out of every 10 in this new method, when the old system would probably give you 6 or 7 good decisions out of every 10. Is that really a better way, then, to stake claim to the idea of judgment being pure, even when it leads to greater suffering? Or do we play by the rules of the world we know, give everyone a fighting chance and save more people overall by trying at least a bit, even though not much for every one of them? The spirit of everything good we saw in these people was exactly that, finding joy in what little they could, wasn't it? Maybe there is something human we missed about all of this. There's certainly something human about them that we missed. We see that they do live lives, meeting friends, shopping and cooking, traveling from place to place, with days off to give to their hobbies a bit, like Decim's mannequins or Ginty's dolls. If they're truly emotionally lacking beings who are meant only for this task, then why do they have these aspects about them? Why do they seem to have personalities? Decim's calmness to Ginty's rage. Why do they make different judgments? Decim's inexperience of 5 years versus Nona's calculations of like 83. It seems almost like, in their limitations, in needing time off, food and sleep, they were meant to be like us at some point. Maybe this new system we thought of was originally the case, and as time went on, they became overwhelmed. Efficiency took over and robbed the time and energy they needed to develop those emotions. It makes even more sense when we consider that that's exactly what happens to Decim when he spends so much time with a human, because why would he be capable of that if it wasn't intended? There's also an interesting note that in the moment we see him being born, for lack of a better term, his eyes go from what we see at the end, once he has become human, to what we see throughout most of the series, the eyes of the Arbiter. And so that does support that possibly they begin much more human. And so what we're asking for here might be something which caused all the flaws we now seek to solve. I think this could explain why they have such rigid rules as well, because we know Decim and Ginty make different decisions on similar non-standard situations. He also has a human hanging around who he can't judge, Mayu, who's there because she and Harada's game ended in something very confusing for him. She actually wasn't upset at all about being killed, but was more upset about the aesthetics of the situation that she went through. I'm adding a little section here during editing because, for as much as this case seems just like some levity in a very dark show, it's also part of the point. The game failed to judge them. Mayu cared more about being in such an unappealing state around her ultimate crush, and Harada more about making a move on a cute girl than either did about being dead. These things were their entire lives, so in this moment right here, they haven't actually really lost them in the way the other participants have so far, leaving behind family or purpose, but rather they can keep fulfilling their purposes. For Mayu, she very well may have even said it was worth dying to be able to spend this time with him in the first place, given she was willing to be the one to die in the game. This test assumes that we'll have unfinished business on Earth, the grief of loss, but this isn't necessarily the case. Some people can handle their darkness in simple ways. The songs of their favorite boy band able to overcome anything negative they felt thus far, and in that simplicity they have no question of, did I live life right? They simply know they did. It's a mindset I think anyone can respect, and it should have been enough to judge them, but the test fails, and Ginty, in sticking to it, can't decide. So he tricks her into a worse outcome, saying that she can retrieve Harada's soul by offering another, and then taking him to the void to be recollected. Instead, they simply both wind up in a place he describes as this.
It's in the name, a space containing nothing, falling forever, while feeling only the worst emotions.
Someone who is able to overcome any darkness in her heart with nothing more than a boy band. That's what they miss in not seeing it Chiyuki's way. And yet, This still shows why they have these rules in the first place, even with massive failures like this, because it highlights the distinctions between the Arbiters, one who's willing to try and understand, and one who appears to almost want to but can't overcome the pain of doing so. We see Ginty hating Decim time and time again, and part of it might be the jealousy that one of them is just stronger, can make better decisions, and that makes clear that some of them will just make the worst decision when left to their own devices. So imagine if the games weren't in place, and their job was to get to know these people instead, to delve into their secrets and desires, while 50 more of them waited at the door. Decim would spend too much time and lose too many to the void in waiting, and Ginty would just assign them randomly to get the caseload done as quickly as possible. And the entire process would be a crapshoot of which floor you wound up on. Even then, it wouldn't be a good result more than likely. This is probably why they implemented the games, to standardize the process. If it's true that they were originally meant to have emotions instead, then the alternative was simply chance. At least this, the games, is a real situation that we can respond to, have an option to prove ourselves, even if not fairly. Isn't that better than just some dice rolling? We should also consider what happens to an Arbiter when they follow this better for us method, and how this would impact things even further. As we said, though they don't have emotions, they are capable of them. As we see, they can be invoked simply by existing in tandem with life for long enough. Sure, they make us more rounded, but with emotions also come many pesky things. You're subject to highs and lows you can't control, love to drive you and hate to slow you down, time after relaxation where you're at your best, and time after work where you could even yell at your best friend. Maybe they would get our case 100% right from being able to feel like we do, or maybe they would be in a bout of depression and only find the worst in everything we said. Maybe they would have experiences so different from ours and problems of their own so impending that every complaint felt like a baby's babbling and we'd be the worst person they'd met. The simplest way to think about it is if your emotions lead you to the best judgments of others at all times, can you honestly say that they have? Plus, these emotions begin to highlight distinctions. Distinctions begin to stress limitations, and from there it's a free-for-all existential crisis. Who are you and where do you fit in? Why are you different from that person over there? Not just literally, but abstractly. Why does distinction exist? What is the purpose of it? And, well, what is the purpose of you by extension? Why do you exist? In short, why are you alive? For the Arbiters, this is a solid and forever answered question, to pass judgment. They are born for this, and they will not die so that they can keep doing it until the end of time. There is no escape from this fate. Well, it sounds depressing to us. This is exactly what keeps them from falling into their own egos and making even worse judgment. Keeps them from losing sight of our judgments due to judging themselves. With a reason, all they need to do is exist. Then consider what happens when you take an eternal being, one who's always been sure of their reason to have existed for lifetimes on lifetimes, and then suddenly release them from it. It's a recipe for ultimate horror. We as humans are capable of picking from many paths presented to us. Every single profession, every single location, every single partner. There are trillions of possibilities, and yet somehow we decide on one, exactly because we are not so limitless as our choice. We know that our time here is limited. We have to make an impact now or never, and so we do. There are doubts we push forward because if we don't, then we achieve nothing for no reason, so we may as well achieve something for any reason if that's the case. Sure, we change up here and there, we feel out the path and correct course, but forward in some way is always the direction as death chases us from behind. We have no choice, and even once it catches up, at least we're free from all the stress of having done it for so long. Imagine that stress both being infinitely larger and then being unable to ever erase it. Imagine having to look at everything you never got to do because you were busy being forced to judge others, send them back down to explore instead, and wonder just how much better it could have been for you. The second an immortal being is given the ability to understand humans, that is, the freedom to choose its purpose, work ceases to function as a concept. And if you force it on them anyway, then they just are beings who hate every single day of their lives with no escape, defeating the point of trying to make them feel anything good about us to begin with. So say you take away their capacity for immortality, make them dig into the purpose of judgment as we do ours. Well, then you've simply reduced how much work can be done and introduced the need for an entirely new system of judgment for them. You've just doubled the issue. We see this all when Chiyuki breaks down Decim's perception of his purpose, bringing him to wonder if it's correct in any way. When this first begins to occur, he only manages to say,
But I am.
because there is nothing else he can say. Having this knowledge doesn't do anything for him. It just makes him aware of a pain that will make his job even harder. If those judging us suddenly began to suffer eternally, how effective would they really be? Maybe they'd have a few better decisions, but does that matter when they're already understaffed and now they'll be having a mental breakdown at every single one? Or faking not to and pushing through without any thoughts, as Ginty appears to? He claims to not care about humans, yet when he forces Mayu away, he's seen making a reminder of her the same as Decim does with his mannequins. We can gauge from this that he's similar in awareness to Decim, but this is a front he puts up in order to protect himself from that endless pain. And that front makes him a much worse judge than the man he hates. The awareness of his life, but the inability to do anything about it creates this awful person. Maybe that's where the hatred comes from, knowing that he's weaker. We have to remember that not everyone would respond as Decim would. Some may be changed for the worse, just as we can be from the same situation which benefited another. Isn't that something the judgments have already shown us? There's a reason that we keep stating how similar the Arbiters are to humans, and it's because at the end of the day, the closer they become to us, the more accurately they judge us, the more like us they are. The reason is simple. To understand a human is to be a human. To weave through the complex web of emotions is to have a complex web of emotions, living through all these nonsensical things and only understanding them through experience and self-reflection, and sometimes not even then. If we ask for more accurate decisions from arbiters, we ask for beings closer to us. And if we ask for the best, then we're simply asking for human beings, one who live forever in the agony of no control, just to judge us. We would be saying that a recreated humanity should exist, nearly as expansive in numbers as our own, simply to suffer for our benefit. A tortured guardian angel for each soul. And if all of this is a judge of character, maybe that's the true test. Because if we ask for something like that, if we ask for something which is us to suffer for us, how could we be good? It would be disrespecting humanity for selfishness. This is directly comparable to a moment, the crux of Chiyuki's final test. Decim shows his assistant her mother suffering from the loss of a daughter and offers her a decision. At the push of a button, she could return to her life with this woman, ease all the tears and self-blame of the person she loved most at the cost of stealing another's life. She debates this, almost convincing herself that she has to do it, but in remembering all she's witnessed, she refuses to. As she says,
Everybody matters to somebody. Somebody like my mom.
in easing her mother's pain, she'd only be passing it on to another somewhere else, countering unfairness with unfairness, perpetuating all the harm. Where Chiyuki refuses to trade another life for her own in her final test, we would fail by pressing the button if all this were true and we still asked for the best judgments. We'd be trading another human for ourselves. Even Nona, the one who set this all in motion, admits that
One thing's clear. Humans can't judge humans.
all she was doing was showing another way was possible, proving a point that she thinks things should change, but not knowing how best to do it. The question is just left open. The ending of the series is one line by Oculus to answer this in his own way, a fourth rule added to the description of arbiters.
Arbiters may not work with life, for doing so would ruin them.
This is a cold reaction. It is a disrespect to humanity in many ways, but within context, it is not meant to hurt us. It is meant to give us a fighting chance and to protect the beings who, despite judging us, actually serve us. To protect them from suffering as a means of existence. To protect them from being us. Anyway, that will wrap things up for this one. So to make this clear, going along with the text at the start, this is a remade version of a video which was previously published, but had visibility issues and so was very not seen, and it was mostly just a practice of, I put a lot of time and work into these, and I don't want them to just sit there or be taken down and not have them be able to be out there and enjoyed and get something from them, of course, and so on. So I wanted to re-record this, rewrite some parts, add a few new sections, like the intro I entirely redid. The editing was entirely redone. It was all re-recorded face to camera and vocal stuff. So it's not just an old video slapped back up. It is definitively a new video, but with most of the ideas of an old one. So let me know what you thought of that, if it's something that you think I should do with similar things moving forward where, oh hey, there was this video of yours that disappeared, if I should take anything like that, redo them and put them back up where, you know, they won't be taken down, won't have visibility issues where like only people in this one country can watch them and so on. It was an interesting thing to do because it gives you a perspective on how you've improved over the years. Like with this one, I was mostly happy with the writing quality. I just definitely thought that there was more I could get out of Death Parade in terms of this topic. I think I worded some things a little too short in the past where I just mentioned them and then moved on and didn't give any, you know, reason why that was important and so on. I tried to cut back on the summary or shorten the summary a little bit to make it, you know, less of that, more analysis. Yeah, it was a nice, I think it was a nice exercise of, I don't think it was poorly written previously, I just think it did show the ways in which I have improved. So it went from something I was actually really terrified of doing, of going back to these old videos that I thought would be really difficult, and became like an interesting enough process. I think there is more rewriting that could be done. I mean, maybe the format for this is even, say, to try and fully rewrite the video. I mean, if you think that's something that would make this more palatable, more interesting, that, you know, it was videos which were taken down, entirely rewritten instead of just re-recorded and edited. So leave your feedback on that, because obviously, you know, I want the things I make to be out there and I want to get something from having done so, but there's no point in doing that if you don't think it's a fair use of what I've made, that it, you know, as long as it only works as long as you don't think it's a jip on, you know, receiving something that has been out there before. This one I felt comfortable with because, again, it had visibility issues, wasn't seen very much, was from years ago at this point, so, you know, probably over half of the people who are subscribed weren't even aware of the channel when it went out and so on. But your feedback on, you know, if you think that's a good decision moving forward will obviously be important. That's all I really had to say for this one. So I'll just leave you with important links in the pinned comment, most notably channel memberships and Patreon, where the names scrolling on the screen right now, those lovely people are all supporters through those various things, and it helps especially right now in the current state of YouTube. But anyway, thanks to everyone for watching, and I hope I'll see you again soon.